The Dust Bowl has been called the worst environmental disaster in American history. Poor agricultural practices and sustained droughts created a decade of misery for the southern plains as the black blizzards destroyed farms and lives. Today, producers in the Oklahoma Panhandle are combining innovations in soil conservation with new farming technology to repair the land and prevent a return of the dirty 30s.
More than 70 years after the Dust Bowl ended, images of the disaster are still disturbing. In the period spanning the years 1931 through 1939, winds sweeping across the plains wiped away millions of tons of topsoil, turning day into night across the central United States. On Black Sunday, dust blew as far as 200 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean, inspiring Woody Guthrie to write a song about the devastation left behind.
So long, it's been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. This dusty old dust is a-blowing me home. I've got to be rolling along.
The Dust Bowl primarily affected 5 states, including the Oklahoma Panhandle, an area once known as no man's land. For survivors, the memories are still vivid.
I don't care how anybody explains to you, they're not exaggerating a thing. You absolutely could not see your hand in front of your face.
Don Wells was 6 years old when the Dust Bowl began. He says the storms didn't blow every day, but when they did, the clouds of dirt were overwhelming.
The dirt came in so bad that it banked up on the windowsills and fell off on the floor. We took the sand out of the dirt. It wasn't sand, this was just fine dirt. We took it out of the house with a scoop shovel and then swept the floor. You'd go to bed at night, and if the dirt if it blew all day, you'd try to go to bed, but then when you get up in the morning, you had a place on the pillow where your head lay. So you know you had to breathe a lot of dust.
92-year-old John Vanata keeps a reminder of the Dust Bowl in a jar labeled Pure 1930s Blow Dirt. He remembers how the dust sifted into his family's farmhouse.
Well, my mother stuffed rags in all the cracks around the windows and doors best she could. And she would wet sheets, and that would try to collect the air, clean the air in the room.
Hundreds of black rollers swept over Panhandle towns like Guyman and Boise City. Millard Fowler grew up in Boise City. He says evidence of the storms could still be found decades later.
Even here in town, my dad's house over here, years later, we were up in the attic, and there's dust up in there in those, between them two before, some of 3 or 4 inches deep.
He has no doubt what caused the disaster.
People from back east had been used to those little rocky, hilly farms, came out to this country and saw all this flat land, and they just went wild. So we plowed the whole darn country up and planted it to wheat. And we raised some good crops there for a little while, till it quit raining.
Clay Pope is executive director of the Oklahoma Association of Conservation Districts. Pope says overproduction of the land, followed by years of drought, was a recipe for disaster.
Well, basically, the farming practices that were being used on the ground in this country back in the 1930s really were more adopted for the eastern part of the United States. You know, areas where you receive a lot more rainfall. Folks are going out and doing clean till. They were going out and mow-boarding the land every year, basically getting rid of all the residue, turning the ground completely over, exposing that soil. And as long as you have rainfall, that's not a problem.
Without the rain, crops failed, exposing bare land to the winds.
They'd blow into a fence. Then the wind would get up, the dirt would blow, and it'd cover up the fences. Well, the only thing they could do is set a post up on top of it. So sometimes they'd have 2 fences there, you know, one on top of the other.
The worst storm arrived on April 14th, 1935. Ernest Harold was part of a rabbit drive, rounding up jackrabbits that plagued farmers during the 30s when Black Sunday hit the plains.
It was as black as I've ever seen. We've had some other dirt storms, of course, but that was the daddy of them all.
We lost a tremendous amount of topsoil. In fact, it's been estimated just in Black Sunday alone, that one dust storm, more dirt was moved off of the southern plains than was moved out of the excavation of the Panama Canal.
After Black Sunday, agricultural scientist Hugh Bennett persuaded Congress to pass the Soil Conservation Act and establish the Soil Conservation Service. The U.S. government encouraged farmers to adopt new practices, such as taking unproductive farmland out of production. No-till farming is another practice designed to protect the soil. With no-till, much of the stubble from wheat or other crops is left on the ground after harvest. Think of it as mulch gardening on a large scale.
The soil is not exposed. You don't see the chance for seeing the wind erosion that you would. Imagine if this was cleaned out, this was completely clean-tilled, and you didn't have this residue on top of it. You would be exposed to the wind in a dry year like this. You would run the risk of seeing high levels of wind erosion.
No-till farming uses a drill known as a coulter, which cuts through the stubble. The seed is planted by a disc opener, and a press wheel follows behind to cover it up, resulting in minimal disturbance of the soil. Weeds are controlled through the use of herbicides and chemicals rather than plowing them under the ground. Dan Harold has been using no-till practices on his farm near Hooker for 7 years.
A lot of advantages that look to us so far as preserving and minimizing erosion and conserving the water. You give up water every time you plow.
Harold admits there are disadvantages. Chief among them, the cost of switching to no-till.
So obviously it's quite expensive for the equipment. Chemical, a lot of years, is more expensive than normal tillage. And to do no-till, you have to have the right planting equipment, and no-till planting drills or planters are significantly expensive.
No-till is used on less than 25% of Oklahoma farms, but Pope believes that number will go up as producers realize the importance of conserving the soil.
Civilization rests on an inch of topsoil. And in some cases, especially in this part of the world, when that inch started to form, Alexander the Great was a baby. So when it goes, it's gone and it ain't coming back.
The Dust Bowl also contributed to devastating floods, as land stripped of vegetation was unable to handle the runoff when the rains returned. We'll explain the effort to tame the floodwaters in part 2 of our series, Lessons from the Dust Bowl, next week.